What's up, everyone? Welcome to this unlisted video. So this is just like the previous recording that I did for the PC overview. I ended up recording it, getting through this settings section, and realizing it was going to be too long for a general video because it's kind of a weird blend between the PC overview and the impressions review. And I planned to do that from the beginning. That's how the script was. I just didn't realize it was going to take me over an hour to actually record what I wanted to put into it. So I kind of trimmed things down a lot. So this video is essentially just the settings screen and just like me talking about all of it. So if you've already watched the main video and gone through the settings, this really doesn't have a whole lot extra. It's more for people that want that, extra stuff and want to talk about compatibility and other type of stuff, because this have like more stuff. I talk about all the settings in there, and so if you're super curious about absolutely everything, this will be interesting. Otherwise, you can safely just skip this video, quite frankly. But yeah, that's why it's an unlisted video. Anyways, moving on, it's probably going to have some weird dialogue because, again, it's acting as if it's the actual video. This is something I recorded for a video. I just didn't finish the recording because I ran out of time. Normally, I try to cut off in an hour. So, yeah, anyways, continuing on. First off, we're going to talk about some gameplay stuff, then we'll get into the sound, and then we'll get into the video stuff, because there's a lot of bugs and weird wonkiness to talk about on this release. I'm sure months down the line, this probably won't be an issue, but let's go ahead and go through the gameplay stuff first. So here we got the aim assist. Yes, this does default to on, and it does affect the mouse, so you'll want to go into the options and immediately disable this if you pick it up. And it does have a separate aim assist for the melee combat, which is kind of nice. Some people do like to have melee combat to have some aim assist, but the ranged one is affected by the default one. I don't know why it isn't called ranged combat and then melee combat aim assist, because it doesn't seem to affect anything else, but I also didn't play with it on for very long, so maybe I'm wrong in that. Then you got adaptive camera motions or whatever. This is kind of like a compatibility thing, so if you get motion sickness really easily, or you happen to be at a lower frame rate, you can end up turning this off. And these are basically small little head scratches, like when you're reloading a weapon, for example, your camera bobs a little bit, or you when you get into a car or something like that, or when you end up hitting the brakes, your camera wobbles a little bit. It's actually really cool when it's working properly, but there are certain bugs with it that can be a little bit wonky as well. And if you boost up your your field of view and the settings file, which we'll talk about a little bit later, then you'll get a bunch of clipping inside of these, so you might want to turn them off if you're doing that as well. And then you get weapon sway. You can have it on your weapon or on your camera, which is super nice. And those are really nice for like accessibility and motion sickness sort of stuff, and just for low frame rates as well. You can end up customizing it to make it a little bit better for your adaptive camera controls. Then we got performance, which is our crowd density. I found that medium is a nice, happy, well, medium, as in it gives good performance and doesn't kind of contradict the world how it's supposed to be filled. Obviously you want to play on high, but that also affects gameplay, so I generally recommend keeping it on medium or high. Don't put it on low, because then just it feels like the world is a little bit empty, unfortunately. And in slow hard drive mode, I'm running this off of an SSD, and I'm not reinstalling it on a hard drive to know what this does, and my hard drive's not slow, so I don't actually know what this does, unfortunately. Third person height for the camera, which only affects the vehicle camera. I wish that this actually affected first person, because it's only effective to the third person, because the first person camera is super low. We'll see that when we get into gameplay. And then there's miscellaneous, like tutorial, skip dialogue, nudity sensor, which is super nice if you don't like to see nudity everywhere. However, do keep in mind there are a lot of sexual themes in this game, and there's like outright pornography and stuff. There's even strip clubs all over the place. So like, even if you turn this on, there's gonna be content that's inappropriate for minors, so recommended not to play this in the living room, essentially, if you've got kids around or people who are sensitive to this type of stuff. Personally, I like to play with it off, but I'm recording, so I have it on, so there you go. I know Americans are kind of sensitive to this type of stuff, but most regions probably won't really care all that much. But do keep in mind that even with this on, there's gonna be some, like, basically pornography in the game. That's just a thing. They ended up doing it. We'll see it when we get into the gameplay. And then analytics, I want them to improve their game, so I have this on. This basically just sends them anonymous data about your activity and stuff, and your bug reports and things. And then over on the interface, we actually have quite a few options here that you can actually enable and disable to customize stuff. So I have certain things. I'm going to turn off hints, and yeah, there's one other thing that's supposed to be down here, but it's not down there. Interesting. Anyways, I have a few of these off, like the activity log and the job tracker, because there's potential spoilers going to pop up. But these are just kind of added things. If you want to make the game more challenging, or you want it to be more immersive, you can end up turning these off, but I actually like a lot of them on, so that's good. Also, the background chats actually affects the subtitles. So show and hide subtitles over characters in the background. There's actually another option that also affects that. We'll look at it a little bit later. And then we have the colorblind modes. Now this is a customized mode to where in the actual gameplay and the mini map we'll have different icons and different colors and stuff like that. I'm not colorblind. I have full color sight, thankfully, but I don't know if these are actually fully sufficient for what they need to do, but at least they're trying. Hopefully it's a little bit better than other games have been, and it's not just like some filter or whatever. And then you got damage number mode. I have it on accumulated because that's the nicest one, but you also have individual and accumulated as both as well. And then you got sticky damage numbers, which makes the damage numbers where the actual damage took place, which is kind of nice, and hit indicators, which is always nice as well. And then threat and damage indicators. Now this is an interesting setting. There's damage only, which it shows you your typical kind of like red icon when you end up getting hit from places. People who play first-person shooters will be 100% familiar with this. But the thing about it is that when you have it on, it'll actually show like where you're getting attacked from as well. Like if bullets are whizzing by you, it'll actually show a blue icon. Ironically, the blue icon is much easier to see than the red icon in this game because the UI is just red all over the place, so the red one kind of blends in. So I hope they add different like color options or some other type of indicator, or maybe allow you to adjust the opacity to make this a lot more readable, because at the current moment, when you get hit by something, you have absolutely no clue where it is, and it's really hard to read on the UI where it is, which this is a nice like accessibility feature, so I would like to see it improved. And then crowds on minimap, have this off. It's really annoying. And now we can actually get into some of the more gameplay, more specific type of stuff. So when we go into the key bindings, mostly everything is rebindable. However, there are some weird omissions, such as the interact key, which is defaulted to F, isn't rebindable in here. There is a configuration file you can customize yourself to actually make it whatever key you want to, and it accepts both key IDs and their naming scheme, which I don't know all the key names, but you can use key names or the key ID to actually assign these, which is super, super nice. However, you can't double bind. So if I wanted two keys to move forward, for example, let's say I wanted H to move forward or something, H doesn't allow me to rebind, so I'd have to have W as that. Hopefully that rebind is anything else as H. Nope. No other game places H. Good, I was right on that. And also, each different category also has its own limitations. So the exploration and combat, if you bind something to W, it won't affect your vehicle. So you can actually have accelerate as a different key or button if you wanted to. However, when it comes down to the gamepad, I don't think you can rebind the gamepad controls. You can go over here and see the control scheme, but I don't see a way to actually customize it. So I guess you're stuck if you end up playing with the controller. Personally, I don't like to use the controller. I've been using the keyboard and mouse most of the time. I did try to use the controller for a little bit, but I wasn't great. I didn't like it. However, you can customize the controller vibration, which is a super nice feature because certain games don't allow you to do that, and they just rumble at maximum speed all the time. And if you have an Xbox One controller, you know that they like to rumble a lot. It's insane. So yeah, and you can actually customize the dead zone as well, so no more needing for custom software for all of that type of stuff, which is super, super nice. I found the defaults to be pretty good for my Xbox One controller, but other controllers might want to customize this a little bit more. I do think they use direct input, so you can use other types of controllers. People have been having issues using third-party software to rebind their buttons and stuff, so you might want to kind of play around with this a little bit and see if you can get that working. I haven't, again, had any issues with my controller, so I'm not experienced in that aspect. And then you have the first-person controls, you have the sensitivity, you also have a zoom sensitivity and inverting axes, which is really, really nice. I think people that play on inverted axis are crazy, but, you know, it's nice to have because some people really do enjoy it. And then there's obviously your other controller options. Now, they actually have separate for the first person and third person. However, this game only has third person camera controls for when you're in vehicles and in the third person camera. I've only been using the first person camera, even for driving and stuff like that, so I haven't bothered with the third person. Although there is a bug to where you can't look behind you when you're in first person vehicle mode right now, which is super, super annoying. We'll get into that when we get into gameplay, I'm sure. And then we get into the actual controller stuff. Again, you get the sensitivities and the inverting, but you also have these advanced options. So if you have this off, it's just your standard controls. But if you show advanced options, this allows you to actually customize the curves of the controller. You have raw, which is linear, and then you have sensitive, which makes it so that the less you actually do the stick, it's actually more effective at the start, and then it's less effective at the end. And then you have dynamic, which is the opposite, which is super, super nice that you're able to do that. Recommended is probably where most people are going to play. I found that raw was my favorite, but I also didn't like the controller. All of these are like acceleration options, and so stuff like the delay or the ADS and stuff like that, you're going to want to turn those to 0 if you want it to be responsive. I'll show a clip from when I was on stream when I was like testing the controller out on the default settings. I just like plugged it in because I was annoyed with my keyboard and mouse, wondering if a bug was caused by it. And the delay was absolutely insane on the default settings, so you're definitely going to want to go in there and change these. Then there's also the horizontal bonuses or the vertical bonus, which is actually super interesting. If you max out your stick in one direction, it will just boost the speed by whatever you set this to, and you can actually boost it all the way up to 3, which is insane. It's like 3 times speed. So it makes it so that you can do quick turning and stuff like that really, really nice. And you can affect how that triggers by affecting the dead zone, which is super nice. I think that combination of settings actually makes the controller a lot more usable. However, I do like the mouse and keyboard. But you don't get those wow. You don't get these advanced options for the third-person camera, unfortunately, but I think these do affect the third-person camera as well, though I haven't really tested it, so I can't speak for the fullities of that. All right, so let's go ahead and get into sound real quick, and then we'll talk about the big one, the graphic settings. So we get dynamic range. You actually get a nice selection of options here. I know a lot of console players like the boost high because they like the boost the bass, but I found that the studio reference was the best. It strikes a good balance, and the audio balancing in this game is actually really good outside of like 1 or 2 glitches and some weird like auto like processing on some of the audio that didn't go through, which I think is a bug. I'm not sure. The audio balancing was actually pretty good, but thanks to those bugs, I actually found that I just wanted to max these out and customize my audio and volume in the Windows sides of things rather than in-game, because there's bugs in the game currently that cause it to ignore these settings. And so I just found that randomly things were like blasting really, really loudly, and I'm like, what the heck? So yeah, but the sound balance in this game is actually really, really good. So you're mostly going to be using these for personal preference uses. You don't need it to actually balance out the sound in the game. I actually want to praise the game for its sound balancing. It's done a really fantastic job. And then mute detection sounds, which is when you get detected. And then disable copyright music is really, really nice if you're streaming or recording. Now, keep in mind, this is not like guaranteed to help. It's just something that will like make the chances of you getting copyright IDs less laggy. Like, it just removes all the ones that they know currently affect it. And at launch, there was already some songs in the game that were triggering this, like triggering copyright strikes and stuff. Well, not strikes, but ID matches and stuff. So your like experience is going to vary with this one, and it's never going to be guaranteed because songs can always be like, what do they call it? Like backlog. They can always go back. I forgot the term for it. It was in my script, but I have my script closed because of how I record these. So I don't remember what it is, but they can go back in time and like set it so that it's like it can affect you in the future. It's weird. Okay, whatever. Moving on. It's a fail safe. It's not guaranteed. That's how I'm trying to say it. All right, and then we get subtitles with cinematic and overhead. The cinematic one is like the ones that are part of the main story and the characters you're directly talking to. However, the overhead ones are really, really hard to read, but this is for like characters out in the world to where they're just out and about, and then you can see like it shows up the little dialogue above their head. It's kind of really difficult to read because it's really, really small. The cinematic ones can be like customized with these the text size and the background opacity, which is super, super nice for accessibility and making it readable on different distances. I found the default to be great on my monitor, but it would be really, really small if I was at like a distance or something, or maybe on a TV. So you can end up turning these up to make it a lot more readable. And it does dynamically adjust the text and all that, which is super, super nice. However, it doesn't affect the overhead, which is super small on every setting I try, and it is really hard to read. And unfortunately, there are certain subtitles that do the overhead thing because there's an auto translator in the game, so you're gonna have to use the overhead subtitles at some point. I believe it's supposed to automatically show subtitles when it's using the auto translator, because it doesn't translate the audio, it translates the text, and so the text will show up on screen and you're supposed to read it or whatever. And so the overhead kind of option, not having anything to customize it, is super annoying. So hopefully they add settings to change that. Now, oh yeah, language. I almost forgot to do language. There's only one audio language in my game. I don't know if there's more that you can end up customizing later, or maybe that it's based off of region that you download it from, but I only got English, but there are a good selection of subtitles here at the very least. Now, I'm the type of person who's always reading subtitles, even if it's in my native language, which is English. So yeah, whatever, but you can do both of them in the subtitles and the interface. I did have one person report that, like, I think it was German or something like that, was missing certain subtitles, but I think that's already been patched in the release version. So I think we're good on that one. All right, I'm gonna take a drink of water real quick. Let's get into graphics and video. So I'm going to very quickly go over all the graphics options, and we're going to go into gameplay as I actually talk about these, because my God, there's a lot of issues with this one. So we got our monitor selection, which is super nice. We got VSync. You can turn it onto a specific frame rate, which is actually pretty cool, although I don't know why there isn't just an on option. I believe depending on your monitor's frame rate, it will show various stages that you could use at that. However, it's weird that there's not just an on button to automatically do that for you. But yeah, so mine, I'm running on a 60 hertz monitor, so it says 59 because it's technically 59.95, but there you go. So that's pretty nice to have, although I do play with it off because I'm running in borderless window, which seems to run perfectly fine. Maximum FPS, I have it capped up at 60. I haven't found any sort of issues with micro stuttering. However, the game does have performance issues, so I'm not always getting to 60 FPS, so I can't really say for sure, but it seems to be capping it properly, which is good. You got the various window modes, windowed, borderless, and the full screen, and you got the resolution options. My is just a 2K screen, but you can actually do a nice little bit of selection. I wish we could enter in our own custom resolutions, and there are some issues with the widescreen resolutions, as in if you go ultra wide, apparently it applies black bars and cuts off some of your UI and some of the cutscenes and scripted segments. And sometimes there's a bug to where those black bars don't actually go away. So keep in mind, if you're playing on anything that isn't 16:9, you might get black bars and they might get stuck on your screen, which is a little bit unfortunate. And I've also seen it reported that HDR mode actually doesn't work in the current version, so it's recommended just to disable it entirely. And then we get into the graphics. All right. The presets, they suck. They're absolutely abysmal. Like, it changes, like, it just basically, if you go on low, it's going to set everything to low. If you set it on medium, everything's going to hit on medium. And if I change it, it's going to automatically apply all of it. So I'm going to just leave it on custom because I don't want to screw with my settings, because this game has a lot of weird performance issues. So if we go on to texture quality, I have it on high because I have the GPU to actually handle it. I'm running on a GTX 1070. Now, that's not very powerful, and it does not run this game particularly well. However, there is an issue with the game to where it's not fully utilizing people's GPUs unless they use certain settings. Now, for me, it turned out to be texture quality and level of detail. Once I turned these on to high, the game actually ended up using my GPU, and now it can run up to 90 to 100% and actually run the game properly. However, there are a lot of performance issues with this game. It is in heavy need of optimization, and a lot of these options don't really affect it all that much. I have a lot of these on low. However, I could turn them all on high and only lose about 4 to 5 frames per second, and that's pretty ridiculously low for what is supposed to be a really demanding game. There's only about 2 settings in here that actually affect it the most, and that's going to be your cascading shadows and your volumetric cloud qualities. And so your resolution and your quality and then your cascading shadow settings are mostly what you're going to be looking at. And distant shadows do affect it here and there, but there's only a high and a low setting, and high just seems to max out that distance, and then low doesn't really do all that much. So yeah, I've just kind of left it. It does cause some shadow pop in and stuff like that, but overall, the game looks all right, so I'm okay with it, and I'd rather play it at a playable frame rate, and I have mostly everything on low because I just want the game to be as playable as possible, because, again, I don't want to deal with it. I just want it to play, and it looks okay. It's not that, like, fantastic looking of a game, even on the maximum quality, apparently, but even on low, it's doable, and it runs. I can get it to 60 FPS sometimes, and it mostly runs around 50 to 55, and that's on a GTX 1070 and a 6700K i7 CPU, so take that as you will. It used to be pretty good, but nowadays it's kind of fallen behind. I've been trying to get a new GPU, but they're not on the market. Everywhere's sold out, so I'm dealing with what I got at the moment. Okay, so anyways, yeah, texture quality, it's got low, medium, and high. I'm not going to change it because it's going to apply it, and I don't want to screw up my settings. And then we got the field of view, which max out at 100 in this menu. Now, that seems to be the exact cutoff. I did set it to 105 in the actual configuration file, which you can do on your own. However, when I put it to 105, I noticed that there was a bunch of clipping, like when getting into vehicles and stuff like that, you could see like clipping into the body for the camera and stuff like that. So it seems like 100 was exactly where they went. And I've only experienced like 1 or 2 issues to where I've actually clipped through certain scenes or whatever, and they were very, very short and brief and hardly noticeable. I'm just really susceptible to it because I pay attention to it so much. So yeah, 100 seems to be the maximum that you can get without screwing with the cutscenes. If you make it higher, you can do that for like usability, but you just know that you're gonna get some clipping here and there, which is all right. And it actually goes all the way down to 70 as well, which is, I don't know why you'd play on 70. You'd probably throw up. Although I guess a lot of console games actually go all the way down to 60. So I guess some people are used to that. Anyways, you got field grain, horrible. Chromatic aberration, it's horrible. Depth of field, it's really blurry. And then we got lens flare. It looks cool. I like it. So there you go. And then you got motion blur. I have it off for performance reasons, but the motion blur is actually really, really cool in this game because there are so many neon lights, and it's actually not a terrible effect. So if you turn it on low, it looks pretty blurry, but if you turn it on high, it's actually really, really nice, but it does tank FPS here and there. So like if you're driving in a car, for example, going 100 plus, it looks really cool on the neon signs, but at the same time, it chugs performance, so I just have it off. Again, it's only like 2 or 3 FPS, but again, I'm trying to get as many frame rates as I can. And then contact shadows is like detailed extra stuff. All these options do actually have a description. However, some of the descriptions don't really tell you a whole lot. Like it tells you what it does, but it doesn't tell you how much it affects performance or exactly how it does what it does. So like stuff like color precision is really confusing. Like high color precision improves overall image quality and reduces color gradient banding. Cool. How much does that affect performance? I have no clue. Also, stuff like ambient occlusion doesn't actually tell you, like, it tells you what it does, but it doesn't actually tell you like the quality and stuff. So it's like low, medium, and high. What is low, medium, high? I have no clue. Anyway, so starting from the top, we got the NSO. You can turn it up to 16 times. You can also force it in your graphics driver to get an additional 16 times. And then you got the local shadows settings, and you got cascading shadows. Again, this is like a major hitter here, is the cascading shadows. So you're going to want to turn these down if you're having performance issues. Same thing with the volumetric fog. And then you got shadow distance, which is the resolution of distant shadows caused by the sun. And then there is the max detail count, which is like bullet holes and all the other various effects that can end up applying onto textures. I think it also affects like blood textures and stuff like that. I have it on low just because, again, trying to make things go. Why is this on medium? Oh, because it's off otherwise. Some of these only go to medium high or medium ultra, so I don't know what's up with that. They could have just made it medium or low, medium, and high, but they just decided to do it that way. I guess it's because they're, again, trying to sort of solve the issue to where they don't have like a specific way to tell you how effective they are, so they just kind of assume that people will see like, oh, ultra is going to be heavy or whatever, but it's not always the case. Again, with all these, I could end up turning them up a little bit. And then we got screen space, reflection quality. You're going to want to keep this on because they actually use this for a lot of the various effects in the game. Same thing with subsurface scattering. I think they combine these two to kind of make like a lot of the textures and like grittiness to it. So for example, the streets, if you turn off screen space reflections, the streets look like Play-Doh. However, if you turn it on, they look like streets. This is a game that's using like global illumination and stuff like that, so it's kind of important to have this one on. However, turning it on off does improve performance quite a bit. So if you are struggling and you're on your last limb, you'll want to turn this one off. And then you got subsurface scattering, again, pretty nice. And then ambient occlusion is easily turn offable. It's not actually that dynamic. When it goes into low, it actually looks really, really blocky and actually like degraded my visual performance, so I just turned it off. Color precision, no fucking clue what that does. Mirror quality, the mirror quality is only when you're like looking at it and there's not really a whole lot of reflections in the game. I think you can turn it on high and then you get a bit more, but I haven't been able to run the game with that going, so I leave it on low. And then level of detail, this is something I had to have on high just to actually like play the game. Again, it wasn't utilizing my GPU properly, so I had to turn it on high. Ray tracing and DLSS. Now I've heard that ray tracing in this game is super intensive, but it looks really cool and really, really good. Some people even say that it's so dramatic that it changes the entire environment, but most people are just saying that, yeah, it looks cool, but it doesn't really affect much. Like, it's not required or anything. It just makes puddles and things like that look cooler. So if you have ray tracing available, you'll want to meter how much performance you want to trade off for the actual visuals, and that's going to be all personal preference. If you're okay at playing at 30 FPS, you could probably use ray tracing. Otherwise, you might be forced to turn it off if you're at a higher resolution than 1080, for example. And then DLSS apparently actually saves quite a bit, but it requires an RTX card again to use. Again, ray tracing here requires a NVIDIA RTX card at the moment. And then you got dynamic fidelity, which is the AMD equivalent of CAS, and so it is basically a dynamic resolution, so you can actually set a frame rate that you want to target, and so you can go all the way up to 240 apparently, but you can actually set it. So let's say I wanted my frame rate to stay at 60, I can change the minimum resolution that the game will go to, and it'll dynamically change the resolution based off of my frame rate. Now personally, I don't like these because I'm super susceptible to it, so whenever it blurs down, I notice it, and it causes me to kind of shimmer a little bit in my own eyes. I'm like, whoa, that was weird, and it bothers me a little bit. It's very similar to things like screen flashes and things like that. For me personally, I just notice it a lot better. However, there is a static one to where basically you're able to set the resolution that it actually renders at, and this doesn't affect the UI. So if you want to run it at like 50%, so let's say you're at 4K and you want to run it at 2K, for example, just put it at 50%, and then the game will render at 50%, and then the UI will actually stay crisp and clean, which is super, super nice. And you can also use this in window mode and things like that as well for that type of stuff. So yeah, overall, lots of settings. That was a long video for settings. Man, let's go ahead and talk about my impressions of the game and all of the bugs that are going on in it. I think I need to cut that down though, so I'm probably gonna re-record it. But anyways, let's go ahead and re-record it.